In addition to state and local races, Americans must decide who will represent them here in Washington. The results could change the balance of power in Congress, influencing President Donald Trump's next 2 years in office. All 435 seats in the lower house of Congress are being contested. President Trump's Republican Party currently holds 235. Democrats need 23 of them to take control. In the upper chamber, 35 Senate seats are being decided. 13 of those races are considered competitive. The president's party wants to add to its 51-seat majority, while Democrats need 2 seats to gain control. CGTN correspondents are monitoring the vote from several locations. We want to begin our coverage with White House correspondent Nathan King. And Nathan, it's going to be a big night tonight. President Trump is not on the ballot, but he's acknowledged this election could represent a referendum on his presidency.
Yeah, in fact, he was the campaigner-in-chief. You know, most midterms are at least a referendum on the sitting president, but he doesn't campaign usually as much as we've seen this president campaign. Just in the last 24 hours, 3 states. He got back here at 2:40 in the morning this morning. Quite an incredible, energetic swing. So he's really staked his name, his reputation on it as well. Whether that was the advice he was getting from Republicans in Congress and his inner circle remains to be seen, but he loves getting out there, giving the stump speech, blaming the Democrats. But the big problem is, potentially, as he focused on immigration as a wedge issue, especially the fear of Mexican immigrants and that caravan, didn't focus as much on the health of the economy, which is very, very strong. And essentially, there's an old phrase, isn't there? It's the economy, stupid. If it's doing well, you campaign on that. But really, it wasn't his decision, is it? It's the voters of the United States. And it looks like record turnout for a midterm election. Let's hear what they had to say as they're leaving the polls.
If you look at the current environment, it's just the politics today has been so divisive. It's all the way to the extreme left to extreme right. I think I'm kind of more in the middle.
I'm so discouraged with what's going on in the world right now in our country. It's unbelievable. The rudeness, the baseness, the cowardice of the Republicans in Senate and Congress. I just want to see it change so desperately.
Well, I ended up voting for a lot of Republicans because I think they've got the best plan, and the economy's going extremely well now, and it's due, I think, to Republican leadership.
Well, we will know maybe later on this evening, maybe by daybreak. There'll be a lot of surprises, as there always are, but don't expect the count to come in that quickly. Remember, this is the whole United States. Polls have started closing in Indiana, eastern Kentucky. We've got to go all the way to Alaska. That takes about 7 hours, so it could be a long night, Mike.
Yeah, indeed. What are the indicators? What should we be looking for as the results start to trickle in?
Yeah, I think what we're going to have to look at is turnout among groups that favor one side or the other. Educated women, for example, for the Democrats, African Americans, Hispanics, also turnout in suburbs that tend to swing in elections. When it comes to the Republicans, over 65s is their biggest group that they generally get, and they vote a lot in midterm elections. They do not need to be motivated to get out. White working class men also have been moving dramatically to President Trump over the last few years. We saw that basically made him win Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, which gave him the presidency. So that is a big turnout group for the Republicans as well. And look at some of the House races early on that will come in that Trump won their districts by about 15 or 10 to 15%. If they go blue, that could be, and I say could be, an indication of a blue wave that we've been potentially talking about. But as you know, in the US, all politics can be local, except the US president tried to make it national. We'll wait and see.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting evening. Nathan King at the White House.
Thanks
so much. Well, there are many tight races across America. One of those is in the nation's Midwest, the state of Iowa, where President Trump's trade policies have taken a heavy toll on farmers and businesses. CGTN's Dan Williams is joining us from the capital, Des Moines. Dan, what are candidates there saying about the election and its effects on the trade war with China?
Well, certainly the trade war here is very much front of mind for many of the electorate here. Of course, Donald Trump came here last month himself on the campaign trail, and it's certainly been played out. Whether it will make a huge impact on the polls, well, that remains to be seen. But certainly this trade war between the US and China, which has seen soybeans especially badly hit, now the price is below the cost of production. And of course, as farmers in Iowa and across the US begin their harvest time, then of course that will continue to play on their minds. Whether, as I say, whether it translates to the votes, well, that remains to be seen. Certainly there's a significant support that Donald Trump and the Republicans can still count on from that farming community, many pointing towards the dairy deal that was part of the Canada-Mexico new agreement that's been put in place there, some access for dairy farmers in that agreement, and pointing towards whether that will perhaps be a sign of further perhaps ground that can be made with other markets such as China. Well, certainly though, we have to wait and see whether that will be one of the issues here. We've got about 3.5 hours or so left of the polls being open. We should find out those soon enough.
We're very much a purple state here, and Iowans are first in the nation when it comes to the presidential race, because we make really sound choices when we are given the information. And I think Iowans have been given the information and they're ready to go out there and make the right choice.
Well, the polls, as I say, very much in favor of Democrats making some gains here. I'm at the Hubble-Hart governorship and election night campaign there, hopeful that they can win back the governorship. It's also hopeful of making, the Democrats hopeful of making gains on the House as well, hopeful of flipping a couple of those seats. They currently have just 1 seat out of 4. They're hopeful by the end of the evening that they can perhaps claim, flip that and make it 3 out of 4 for them.
It looks quiet now, but I'm sure it's going to be buzzing later this evening. What are some of the other states to watch out for in the Midwest?
Well, certainly, as you heard there from Nathan, the likes of Michigan, the likes of Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, those were the states, as Nathan said, that really propelled Donald Trump to the White House 2 years ago. So we need to be obviously keeping an eye on those seats. But across the Midwest, there was a poll just last week that suggested that the Democrats could win back 14 seats, 14 extra seats in this midterm election. If that happens, that will obviously propel them, no doubt, towards winning back the House. And that is exactly what the Democrats will be very much hopeful of achieving here at this midterm election.
And that Missouri Senate race, which is your neighboring state, also one we'll be watching tonight. Very important race there as well. There are some key races in the South that we're watching. In Georgia, history could be made if Democrat Stacey Abrams wins the race for governor. If she's able to defeat Republican Brian Kemp, Abrams would become the first black woman governor in the U.S. The latest polling shows a very tight race in a state that is traditionally a Republican stronghold. The Florida governor's race is also tight between Democrat Andrew Gillum and Republican Ron DeSantis. Current Republican Florida Governor Rick Scott also running for one of Florida's Senate seats. He's hoping to unseat longtime Senator Bill Nelson. Both contests are key in a state that often helps determine who wins the White House during presidential races. One West Coast state could decide the future of the House of Representatives. As CGTN's May Lee reports from Los Angeles, voters in California are deciding several key races.
Here in California, voters are expected to turn out in big numbers, and here at this polling place, that has certainly been the case so far. There's been a record number of registered voters this year here in the state. 19 million people have registered, and everyone says they want their vote to count.
Gotta vote, gotta vote. Big changes need to happen, and the more people that get out here, the better chance we have of those changes happening.
I know I'm concerned, and I want to have my voice heard.
I actually voted way earlier than this. I'm just hanging out here because I have been so stressed
Now, the focus is on at least 7 congressional seats that are being contested here in California that could help flip the House back to the Democrats. Experts say ground zero could be Orange County, which is just south of Los Angeles. That county used to be conservative, but things are shifting. One big reason is because there are more immigrants in Orange County, many of whom come from Asia. They care about issues regarding immigration, citizenship, and health care, and those are all issues that have come under attack by President Donald Trump. Now, a recent survey of Asian voters shows that 52% have an unfavorable view of the Republican Party versus 58% who say they have a favorable view of the Democrats. And when it comes to Donald Trump, 3 in 5 Asian voters surveyed say they disapprove of the job that he's doing as president. Now, there's one more interesting point about California, and that is the mail-in ballot. Californians love to mail in their ballots. In fact, the last 7 consecutive statewide elections, the majority of voters have chosen that method. Now, that could be tricky in this election if things are too close to call. That means every vote will have to be hand-counted, and that could take several weeks. So this could be a long wait for all of us, depending on how this election day pans out. Mei Lee, CGTN, Los Angeles.
I'm joined by Jason Box. He's the Executive Vice President of PSB Research. They are a firm that does market research and political polling. Let me start there with Trump. Did he make a mistake by talking about the caravan so much and not the economy? What's your take on whether or not it was received well or not?
Well, I think it was received perfectly by the people he intended the message for. He has perfected the art of speaking to your base. He's talking about caravan, he's talking about Kavanaugh, and he's talking about tax cuts. And that goes straight to the 35–40% of people who like him and love him.
That base, though, when you look at the presidential election, which he won, you had the Hillary Clinton camp and you had the Sanders camp.
Right.
And a lot of the Sanders camp, they were really unhappy about how things went. Some of them stayed at home.
Yeah.
Some of them voted for other candidates. It doesn't seem that way this time around. It seems like the Democrats are pretty well galvanized. How does that change the complexion of this race?
Well, they put together the coalition in 2018 that they thought they could put together in 2016. So all of a sudden, you've got more women who are running for Congress than ever before. 260 women are on the ballot today, 200 of whom are Democrats, people of color. Young people are voting, hopefully in numbers that we haven't seen before. I'm going to wait and see what the numbers actually say. We always talk about young people voting, and then we're always disappointed. But that's the coalition that Barack Obama put together in 2008 and 2012, and that's the coalition that Democrats will need in 2020.
Every analyst I talk to have been burned by the young people. That's the way they feel. They're always cautious. But you've actually been working with some young people who are pretty energized at getting more young people to sign up to vote.
Yeah, you know, the shooting in Parkland at Marjory Stoneman Douglas really galvanized an entire generation of young people. The March for Our Lives gave birth to a group called Empower the People, and their goal is simply get 18 to 24-year-olds to register and to vote. And they are not alone. There are a dozen or so organizations like that, and we're just hoping that they're able to reach people. And quite honestly, they don't care who you vote for. You need to vote. It's really important.
I'm seeing where some states are going to have to extend hours because of the long lines. Yeah. The turnout, remarkable, even before today's voting, almost 40 million people in early voting. What does that tell us about the enthusiasm for this race?
Well, we've been seeing raised enthusiasm on both sides, really, for the last couple of months. We shouldn't get too excited. The highest turnout we've ever seen in a midterm election, at least in the last 100 years, was in 1966, and it didn't even get to 49%. So we're definitely going to need to see a pretty big boost from what we're normally would see. But you're seeing extended voting hours in Texas. Hopefully, we're going to see them in Georgia. There are long lines in really long places. Not always a positive side of democracy. I think there are some problems with democracy today as well.
Well, let's talk about that, because I'm seeing reports in a lot of states where they're having problems with the machines and that sort of thing. What's going to be the takeaway?
Well, the takeaway is, as a democracy, you have an obligation and an expectation to provide the tools for people to actually vote. Georgia is a particularly terrible situation, and I'm sure there'll be lots of people talking about that in days to come. But we can't expect our people to come out and be positive about the political process if we don't actually provide them the opportunity to vote. That means not only the tools in the voting booth, but actually things like letting people off on election day. It's ridiculous that you have people who can't vote because they simply can't get time off work.
Talk to me about specific races that you're going to keep your eye on, and they may telegraph how this evening goes.
Well, it's all about the size of the wave, right? So there are races like Virginia 10, which is really local. It's a Republican-held seat. Almost certainly Barbara Comstock is going to lose there. That's the lower end of the wave. The other end of the wave are those Republican seats that aren't even on the radar. So Maryland 1 is a perfect example, a guy named Andy Harris, who is a real Trump advocate. There's a guy running against him named Jesse Colvin, who's a local guy. He's a veteran. We've seen lots of veterans running in this election. If Democrats can compete in places where they've never been able to compete before, that has a huge implication for what we see tonight and tomorrow, but also for 2020 and beyond.
And the presidential election starts tomorrow?
I think it already started, but certainly we'll start talking about it tomorrow.
We'll never get enough of this election stuff.
Never.
Always great to have you on the program, and I know you're busy tonight, as are we, but thank you for stopping by.